have been with MSF for the last 10 years. I'm a surgeon, right now I'm a surgeon at NYU, and I'm an assistant professor there, and I do a lot with medical education. 10 years ago, I started with MSF on my first mission, which was in Sri Lanka during the war between the Tamil Tigers and the Sinhalese. And then I went in '99, I went to Burundi, and most recently, 2 years ago, I was in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
I was working as a logistician, which is a support person for a medical program. I traveled all over Africa, and I hadn't been to Sudan, and I heard a lot about what was going on in Sudan, and I was a little bit frightened. They said, "You're going to Darfur," and I think I turned pale white. It's called Kalma camp. I think it had 60,000 people living in plastic sheeting, with sticks with plastic sheeting over top of it. When I left, I think it was 80,000, 85,000 people. I'd never seen anything like that in my life. It's not that these people are voluntarily without a home. They've forcibly been displaced because of conflict. They have no alternative. It's about as low as you can go on the scale of comfort. You don't have a mattress or a pillow, or sometimes even blankets. Sometimes it takes a long time before people to do a blanket distribution inside a camp, which eventually did happen so that people would stay warm. But it's incredibly shocking to see the vast number of people that are displaced and without a home and without a real means of taking care of themselves.
The most dangerous area that I've been was my most recent mission in the Congo. The political context in the northeastern part of the Congo is very, very complex. There were international wars that were being fought between proxy armies from Uganda, Rwanda, and Burundi. They all left the country in about 2003 and left kind of a void in a very, very rich area. And the war that broke out there is really a gang warfare. And the soldiers are teenagers. They use fire, they use guns, they use machetes, and they use rape. All of these as tools of war. And it is a brutal, brutal war. I took care of children, 6, 7, 8 years old, who had attempts at decapitation. Wounds that were 2 or 3 inches deep in their neck. And they're alive and they're fine, but what about the ones that don't survive? And that war, I think, that's going on, and it's going on currently, is one of the most horrific and brutal, I think, that's going on in the world today, much like what's going on in Darfur.
The most common phrase that you will hear in Darfur and Sudan is inshallah, which means if God wills it. If you were to look at these people's faces and talk to them, once you talk to them, they don't think it's the apocalypse. They have a really great demeanor. They've lost everything. They've lost their food from their last harvest. They've lost members of their family. They've lost their home. They've lost every single thing that they've ever owned in their life. And now their children are malnourished and they don't have means for taking care of themselves. But yet, they still have incredible resilience. Still are happy to a large point. Not happy of the horrible tragedies, but just happy to go about their lives and to be able to still be alive.
The hardest thing that I have ever had to deal with emotionally on an emotional level was in the Congo with victims of rape. It is something that I personally, and I have not, that I know of, I don't know anybody who's been raped, and I haven't been raped, but I took care of a 7-year-old girl who had been brutally raped, and I had to operate on her. And I took her to the operating room and I repaired her vaginal laceration, and whatever it was that went into her abdominal cavity, and I had to operate on her stomach and fix that injury as well. And I did actually okay for the first week after that. But then I had to replace the gynecologist in the Center for Victims of Sexual Violence. And I went there and I had to hear testimonies of women who had been raped and then examine them for evidence of trauma and for evidence of sexually transmitted diseases and for rape. And I heard 4 stories in the first morning. The one girl was 13 years old, and she was held for 1 month and raped repeatedly by 4 soldiers. 2 other women were in their middle age, were taken off in a field and were raped only for 1 day, and a 79-year-old woman who was raped. 79. After that morning in the clinic is when it all hit me. And I went home and I broke down and I couldn't eat and I could barely work. I went back to the hospital that afternoon, and the women that worked, the nurses and the social worker that worked in that center, took me aside and they said, "Marianne, we realize how hard this is. Don't come back. You can just come back and do the exams. You can just do the medical part. It's okay." And you sit there and you realize that I have never been hurt or injured, and these women are comforting me. Why are they comforting me? I'm the one that should be there giving comfort. And it has taken me a very long time to come to grips with that impact, the impact that something like that is a tool of war on a civilization. And I don't understand how people can do it. I think it's one of the reasons when you see something like this happening that you realize, how can I not go out there and try and do something, anything, in a way. And fortunately I have a skill that I can use and that I can be effective, but it's something like that that really just drives you to want to go back out there and work in that environment and do something.
I've really fallen in love with doing the work that we do. I see the difference that we make as an organization. It's an enormous impact, and you can feel it on a personal level. And that's why I like doing it. That's why I went out again on a second time, and that's why I hope to go out again on a third time and a fourth time. And I don't know what my limit is. I think it's changed my perspective in that I understand how difficult life is for some people and how easy mine is and what I should and shouldn't take for granted in my own life.
Okay.